Welcome back to Full Val Mode, where we don't tiptoe around the truth, we run straight at it. Today we're digging into one of the most ignored but most powerful offices in Arkansas, Land Commissioner. Most Arkansans don't realize this office controls millions in state assets, but it also controls public land, tax delinquent properties, mineral rights, and the pipeline of who gets what land and why. And in an election year where transparency is already in short supply, this race matters more than ever. So join me for an exclusive one-on-one interview with Christian Olson, candidate for Arkansas Land Commissioner. We're going to talk about what this office really does, who it actually serves, how partisan politics and real estate interests collide, and why voters should pay close attention to who's sitting behind that desk. No fluff, no script, no safe questions. Let's get into it right here on Full Val Mode. Hey everyone, welcome to Full Val Mode. I'm your host, Val Emmons. And today on the show, I have Christian Olson with me, who is the candidate for Arkansas Land Commission. And many of you don't understand how important this job is and this title, but you're going to find out today. So, Christian, if you would just give everyone a little background on yourself.
First of all, thanks, Val, for letting me come on and talk to you and your listeners. I've been enjoying the campaign trail, and it's been a lot of fun to get to know people and to tell people a little bit of who I am. So to start off with, again, my name is Christian Olson. I'm running for Land Commissioner. And I have a background in politics and campaigns and policy. But a little bit of personal information about myself is I grew up here in Little Rock, went to school at UCA in Conway, got a degree in political science and communication. And I live still in Little Rock with my wife and two boys. I've got a almost 7-year-old and a 10-year-old, and they they keep us busy, and they're a lot of fun on the campaign trail. One of the reasons why I got on the campaign in the first place is just with my background in government and campaigns, I saw a way that I could continue to serve. So I started working on campaigns for conservative Republicans when I was in high school. I actually had a Republican candidate for State House and Justice of the Peace. Two guys came to my door, and my dad volunteered me to go door to door for them because I had told him that I was interested in politics. He said, well, guess what? Next weekend, you're going to go door to door with these guys.
You've done the grassroots.
I've knocked on so many doors. I have. That's where I fell in love with just meeting people, listening to their stories, finding out about them. Really enjoying people, I think, is a huge asset for being in politics because you learn a lot as you get to hear people's stories.
And you learn about.
I was actually working on campaigns before. Yeah, I think it's incredibly important. We all are prone to having an idea of what we think is best and what we think will work. But the more you hear from other people, the more you realize how beneficial it is to kind of expand your perspective, right? So I worked on campaigns before college. Part of leadership is being able to articulate the needs that you see. But I think really good leadership is also being able to understand the needs of other people and help meet those needs. I think really good leadership is empowering your team, the folks that work with you, in order to get the mission done, achieve the goals. So you can't do that if you're not listening to people. So I got to work on campaigns before college, and then I got to work on campaigns after college. And my first full-time real job after college, and after working part-time on campaigns and managing some campaigns, was in the Land Commissioner's office. I got to work for a couple of years under John Thurston. I got to do some policy work on the 12-foot channel in the Arkansas River and how we could help to make river navigation and transportation more efficient for Arkansas businesses. And I left there to work on ACE's campaign in his office. And I really learned in ACE's office how important it is to get people in the same room talking to each other for the same reasons we just talked about, because everybody has a different perspective. And sometimes you can get a much better quality decision when you have just a lot of input. And I think ASA did really well on some things. And then there were some other things that, I think we can all agree nobody's perfect. And we all, I think that's the challenge of leadership is political leadership.
I'll just say where you're going with that. I'll just say, everyone knows I helped get him elected too. Like, I was so for ASA, and I was disappointed, and during the COVID thing and just a lot of other things with ASA. So I know where you're coming from. I get it.
Yeah, and I worked in his office for the first year, and I really got to understand to respect the decision-making process if you're in the room, and to give a little bit of grace if you're not in the room. Because even working in his office, I'll admit that there were things I did not understand, and that's because I wasn't in the room when the decisions were made. But ultimately, leadership is accepting responsibility for the decisions you make, whether they're popular or not. And I respect Asa as a person, even though there are certainly times where, I'm pretty sure I would have gone a different way than he did. But also understanding in politics, your options are usually pretty binary, right? You either get to choose this person or that person. You don't get to construct your perfect candidate. And so being able to articulate why you should vote for me as opposed to my opponent is a huge part of this race. But after working in Asa's office, I left to go work for the agriculture department, and I learned a lot about Arkansas agriculture and their needs and just the reality of how difficult it is to make it in farming. And I was there for about 3 years before going to the state securities department, where the state securities department regulates the financial advisors and broker dealers and just tries to make sure that people who are entrusted with handling other people's money are the kind of people who are trusted to do that.
I mean,
And
that's
so,
like your home, your all of your loan officers, brokers, mortgage companies included. So that's
right. That's right. And so that was a pretty interesting experience because, sometimes there's judgment calls. People would come in and their personal finances would not be in the greatest order. And then you'd have to find out, like, why? Were they convicted of fraud? Or is this because they're trying to put their life together after a divorce, right? Those things are not equal. I definitely approach government with how can we make sure we're doing our job, but not let the government get in the way. I'm a big believer that the government is clunky, government is slow, and the more fair and objective it tries to be, the slower and clunkier it is. Efficiency is often what you get when you don't have to treat people fairly. But it's absolutely essential that government is fair. And so it's just inherently by nature a slower creature than private industry and private business. And because of that, government needs to do its job well, but it needs to stay out of the way as much as possible. It just isn't nimble or flexible enough to compete.
so like you can't bulldoze your way and do whatever you want. You have to do it by the law and the Constitution of the state as well as the United States.
That's right. And whatever you do, you need to do it in a way that's fair and in a way where if your whole thought process was put up on a billboard or on the headline in the newspaper, that you can still defend it. And I think that that's really the approach anybody in government should take, right? If you had to explain it to your mama and your Sunday school teacher, you want to be sure that it still holds up and makes sense. I was at the state securities department for about 3 years, most of that time being the deputy securities commissioner. So in that position, I was able to learn how to actually manage the nuts and bolts of a state agency, how to hire a team, make it work better than when I got there. I like to say that even though I couldn't tell anybody how to do their job, I could understand the workflow and the personalities and create a team that was stronger than before I got there. But also some bolts of going through the state audit system, the state audit cycle, the state budget cycle, how to downgrade positions, cross-grade positions, and just shape the agency to get the most out of what the legislature gave us. And there was some efficiencies created there, but it's always very satisfying when you're able to do a better job and do more of that job with less than what you started with.
And leave it better than when you found it.
That's right. And so after about 3 years there, I ended up going to business for myself and just working for myself, buying some rental properties and getting involved in some real estate. And I also had to work as the trustee for my grandmother's estate when she passed. And I've always had an interest and passion for politics. And we just found that this was probably a good time for me to at least offer what I think I can give the people of Arkansas and give them a choice in this election for land commissioner.
I know you don't like to bring this up a lot, but I know that I can understand why it's personal, but many folks might not know that you left the securities department when you found out that your son had cancer.
That's right. In 2020, so COVID had already started to complicate the world. We got that news and we had to navigate being in a couple places at once. My wife and I, we basically went through a period of time where we didn't see much of each other because one of us would have one child and the other one would have the other. And, fortunately, God has been extremely good to us, and everybody's doing really well. And yeah, it's not something that becomes part of the campaign, but it is part of our story and how we got here.
And how you endured. I mean, and he's doing good now?
Oh, he's doing so good. He's on the swim team. He's
Awesome.
placing at meets. He is a ray of sunshine. He loves people. He actually really loves the campaign. And, like I said, God has been extremely good to us. And, politics gets people excited. It gets people, sometimes a little hot or a little bit, there's hurt feelings sometimes. But, after you go through certain things in life, everything else is pretty easy.
Yeah, it doesn't even matter anymore at that point, does it?
Right. And your priorities really come into focus for sure. Without faith, it's hard to take care of your family. And if you're neglecting your family, you really aren't. Is anything else you're doing actually mattering? I'm a big believer that God gives us responsibilities. He gives us jobs to do. He puts us in certain places for certain reasons. And if you have a family, that's your number one job right there.
I will completely agree with that. And that's why I've been absent the last couple of years, because my family was more important to me than anything. And I kind of dipped out for a little bit myself. But let's move on a
Yeah.
little bit. You know, how many years basically from the time that you worked on ACES campaigns and all the other candidates from John Thurston? So how many years of qualifications is that basically?
Well, I would say about 9 years of actually working for the state, about 26 years of working for conservative Republican candidates. Now, some of that was off and on. I did a little bit less when I was in college and when I first got married and had kids,
So
but I've
let's
always
add
been
that up.
around it. I've always tried to help.
So let's add
Yeah,
that
so
up.
some of that is overlapping, right?
So you were basically you were working on your first campaign when your opponent Cole Jester was in pull-ups.
I was 14 years old.
I'm sorry, I just had to.
Yeah, I was 14 when I first started on campaigns.
I can't help myself sometimes. So I wanna get in a little bit into, I think, like I said in the beginning, I don't think a lot of people understand how important the land commissioner's office really is, because anyone in real estate or land development, they care enormously who gets this position, such as Bart Hester, who championed the ADU law, which capped ADU fees for like anybody who wanted to come and swoop up and buy up little houses to build Airbnbs. They capped the fees, making it where the county no longer has control of that. Which, I mean, if you usually Republicans are for local control, but clearly they weren't on this, and I think that was a big problem for me, because the housing in Little Rock has just been ridiculously out of control because of all these companies coming in and snapping up all this land. So how do you make sure that, like, there's not backroom deals, that, people like Bart Hester's endorsing your opponent? To me, there's a reason for that.
So 90% of what the office does is sell tax delinquent property, where if you don't pay your real estate taxes for about 2 years, the county will send you nasty mail asking you to pay your taxes. And at the end of that 2 years, the county gives up, and the county collector will certify those parcels over to the state land commissioner. And the land commissioner will start to try to collect those taxes for about another 2 years. And they'll send you nasty mail saying, pay your taxes. And if you still don't do that, then the land commissioner will put those properties up at public auction and try to collect the money that's owed to the county. So because of that relationship that the land commissioner has with the counties, I think that the land commissioner really is a support organization for the counties. It's kind of a statewide tax collector for the counties. And so my campaign has largely been based off of, not only am I a limited government and a transparent conservative, but also a local government conservative. Just like you said, it is incredibly important that we don't centralize power if we don't have to. And so because I've traveled almost 15,000 miles on this campaign so far, I've seen how different the counties are. Scott County is not the same thing as Prairie County. It's not the same thing as Miller County or Van Buren County or Crawford County or Benton County or any of the other counties. Each county is incredibly unique, and their circumstances are also unique. And so I think it's really good to let the counties tackle their problems the best way that they think that they need to do it. And part of that is because local government is most responsive to the people. When I'm out on the campaign trail, I like to say, but I don't like to pay my taxes to the federal government because I don't trust them to spend my money the way that I would. The state legislature is much better at being responsive to the people and spending our tax dollars in a responsible way. But it's the county government that really is the most responsive and is the most accessible out of all of them. And so, although I don't like paying my taxes, I'd rather pay my taxes to counties than to just about anybody else. And the reason for that is that you are likely to see your county elected officials at the grocery store, at church, or even at Thanksgiving. I think that's one of the reasons why keeping power decentralized wherever we can is a really good idea. So anything I can do to support local control and the county's ability to decide for themselves, that's the position that I would like to take. Now, when it comes to transparency, the property does go to public auction, and that is one of the ingredients to keep things transparent, right? Where everybody gets a fair shot at the same properties. But I also think that it's a good idea to select somebody for this office who has a commitment to transparency and a history of supporting the Freedom of Information Act that we have. And I've used it in my previous jobs, campaigns. We've used it and I think that anybody who holds office needs to be accountable and transparent. And in one of our conversations earlier, we talked about being able to maybe list on the land commissioner's website people who have bought the tax delinquent property. And I think that that's a great idea. I think all that information is probably already available through the Freedom of Information Act, but you do have to submit a request. They have to process it. I don't see any reason why we couldn't just put that on the website.
These are Arkansans properties, and some of them have been their properties throughout their families, generations, and they lose them for junk fees, just things that they overlook. Or how do we make it transparent so that all Arkansans actually get an opportunity to, I mean, I know it's in the paper and stuff like that, but you can't tell me that these developers or real estate moguls, construction companies don't get a heads up to when something's coming out, what to look for. And like you said on our conversation previously, your job as land commissioner is to make money for the state. I mean, I know these are people's properties, but it's to make money off the state. And giving someone a deal at an auction, that's not making money for the state.
I think because every property is required to go, so the process is after those years have gone by where the land commissioner has tried to contact anybody with a recorded interest in the property and let them know, hey, this property is in danger of being sold. When that property does go to be sold, they all have to go to public auction. And so I'm not aware of any claims where the property haven't gone to public auction, but to some extent, you are right in that there's a lot of people who don't know about the process. They don't know that this is available for them if they're interested in buying some property. Now, knowledge is power, right? And one of the things that the Land Commissioner's Office does as part of their education is that if you're interested in buying this land, you need to kind of know what the potential pitfalls are. Because sometimes when these properties go to auction, it's because the current owner has made a decision that the property is not worth the taxes that are owed on it. Sometimes it's just a small triangle in the right of way and nothing can actually be done with it. And so they just don't pay the taxes and let the state land commissioner's office come in. Or the property can have liens on it because those liens don't go away just because it goes to public auction and the ownership is transferred. And so when you do buy property at the land commissioner's office, it has to go through a quiet title action where you take it to the court and you put out notification and give anybody that has an interest in the property the chance to say, no, this lien needs to be satisfied, or I have some ownership in this property. And so have to go through that process. And so I think if you're unfamiliar with the process and you're unfamiliar with how to do the title search and you're unfamiliar with these things, these are genuine barriers for normal people, right? Your average person who's not a real estate developer or somebody who's interested in real estate. But if you have that background, you already have an advantage, right? You know kind of where to go to get the title work done, or you can do the research yourself. Those are advantages that pretty much anybody in real estate will have. And I don't think that there's a way to get around that besides better education. But I think making sure that the process is followed, that every I is dotted, every T is crossed, and that notification goes out to all the interested parties and that every parcel goes to public auction. The system is designed to make it as fair as possible. But I think it goes back to primarily the person that you select. Is it going to be somebody who makes sure that every I is dotted and every T is crossed? Is it going to be somebody who has a background and a track history of not having gotten in trouble? Because and they call these possessions of public trust for a reason. bad actors will find a way to do something bad. Unfortunately, that's part of, they say you get the government you deserve, right? And so that's what the campaigns are
Let's not even
for.
get into that lately because woo. No.
I know.
So
But
so I
a
get
lot of
what you're
that,
saying. I get what you're saying because a lot of folks don't understand and they kind of are hindered because if it used to be that they'd fill those little banquet hall rooms with people like I can help you buy tax lien property and make your real estate fortune and all that stuff. But because you can actually learn how to do it yourself, but people are scared because I mean, when you go to the land commissioners and there's an auction, you have to put up some money. You have to put up a little bit of money. Explain how that process works.
yeah. So if you're going to come in and bid on property, you need to have certified funds, right? You need to be able to pay to put actual money down on the property pretty much right
How
away.
much is
When I
that?
was there about 12, I believe you have to be prepared to pay the full price. The property owner could still come and cancel the sale after the sale by showing up and paying their taxes. And they had about I think it was a 90-day redemption period where they could do that. The law has changed now to where you can only redeem your property up until the night before the sale. And so that redemption period has gone away. They will no longer cancel the sale.
Well,
So I
because
think
that was a drawback. Because I mean, if you bought the property, you had to wait 2 years to make sure somebody didn't redeem it. So you couldn't have access to the property, so your money's tied up for 2 years.
that redemption period was just a matter of months, whereas the litigation period was a full year. And so when people would buy property, we would tell them, don't build anything, don't tear anything down, don't alter the property within that 1 year period. Because if the owner came and sued and it turns out that we missed something in the process and somebody didn't get notified and the court rules against the sale, the new owner could be responsible for the damage or alterations they made to the property. And so I think really what it comes down to is whatever we can do to educate people on the process. Daylight is good, education is good. And the more people who understand the process and aren't afraid of the process, the more willing they are to bid on the property. And that, of course, raises the price that the state is able to collect for the counties and for the property owner if they come and make a claim on those excess proceeds.
So do you know of any like now education that the land commissioner's office goes out and does for people to learn who might want to do this? I mean, how does that work? Because I think that would be a great idea. Our attorney general goes out and speaks about how, what he does for people. I think that our land commissioners should educate folks on how to use their office.
That's right. The state auditor has the Great Arkansas Treasure Hunt, and they spend a lot of effort and time and just educating people in how it works. I think the land commissioner has done a pretty good job with the resources that they have. And I know Commissioner Lant, he told me he goes to every Rotary Club and Civic Club he can, trying to explain what the office does, because most people don't know. And I like to say that not knowing what the land commissioner's office does is a lot like not knowing who your prosecutor is. It's a good thing. It means that you haven't been in trouble for not paying your taxes. Their website is pretty good, but there's still I think it's still fairly complicated. And so I think, it's heavy on the statutes and what the statute says. And I think it needs to be probably a little bit more accessible to the average person. And I think that adding some training sessions, that kind of thing, that just makes it a little bit more accessible to the average person would be another great improvement.
Yeah, like some webinars kind of stuff that you want to learn how to do this, here's a link, register for the webinar. That we wouldn't have to spend a lot of money to do that. You can do that for free and just take time.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great idea. I know that Commissioner spoken at the Landlord Association meetings and some of the Arkansas Real Estate Association meetings.
Day Arkansan that wants to better their life or something, that's trying to figure out how to navigate this stuff with all these people that already are ruling the network of it.
I would argue, from my experience, that even for real estate professionals, tax delinquent properties is still really niche. Because when I've talked to real estate agents, they don't really know a whole lot more than most other people because there's not really a commission to be made off of selling
Right.
tax delinquent properties. And so that's just not something that they do.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. And so when we're talking about niche, we're talking about there's really a limited number of people who understand the process and are willing to explore it. And one of the questions I had with a real estate agent was with the land commissioner's office, consider a finding fee or something like that to incentivize real estate agents to help sell the property when it doesn't sell at public auction. Because when it doesn't sell at public auction that first time, it goes onto what's called the post-auction sales list. And that's when people can bid online. But those properties, it doesn't go back to public auction. It just sits there and waits until somebody decides that they're interested in that property. And I think, Tommy Land has done a really good job. When he took office, there were between 25 and 30,000 parcels held by the Land Commissioner's office. And because of the increased demand for real estate and increased prices, they were able to get those parcels down to about 5,000. Now that's going to change pretty much every year because there's, some parcels will roll on for new tax delinquencies, and then some parcels will be sold. But I think we could actually benefit tremendously by engaging the real estate professionals like real estate agents if we can figure out a way to treat the taxpayer fairly and buyers fairly and the property owners fairly. If we can incentivize real estate agents to help navigate this, I think it would make it much more open for average people.
So another hard question. Currently, are county employees or family members of those employees or friends or whatever, are those folks allowed to buy these properties? Or do you have a problem with that? If there is? I mean,
I've had some people argue that if I'm for local government, then why is the state involved at all? And I think it provides a pretty good check and balance, right? Because the property originates from the collector. The assessor says how much is owed. The collector is the one who tries to get it. And if the taxes aren't paid, it's the collector that sends it to the state.
a conflict of interest if it's not to somebody else, honestly.
Right. Because then you would have the county saying, well, you owe this much money to us and we're going to put it up for sale. And if they did that, then I would have a huge problem with county employees or their family members bidding at auction because it's the opportunity, it's the temptation, it's just not a really good setup. I'm not aware of land commissioner's office employees buying property, but if it's not against the rules already, I think it should be against the rules. People have asked me, Christian, you're a real estate investor, you own some rental properties. Would it be a conflict of interest for you to be land commissioner? I'm like, well, I don't think it'd be a conflict of interest for me to be land commissioner unless I started buying tax delinquent properties, in which case that would be a huge conflict of interest. And I certainly would hold that to the employees as well, because I'd ask for that to be statute. There should be no question about it. Because again, you're asking for public trust. One of the worst things you can do is the arm of the government is to take people's property, right? The first thing is to take somebody's life. The next thing is to take their liberty. And then the next thing after that is to take their property. And so if you are ever in a setup or situation where the government is about to take somebody's property, you need to have trust and confidence that that's process is as fair, as open, transparent as possible. So I
You
don't
have the
think that
employees of the land commission
employees,
office buying up property. You can't really trust that.
no, that would be a huge conflict of interest. If it's not already prohibited, I would absolutely support making sure that that is prohibited, and not just by policy, but by statute.
So let me ask this: where does the money from these tax sales, after they pay what the taxes are owed to the county or whatever, where's the overage? Where does that money go? What pot does that go into?
It doesn't go into a pot. It's held in case the property owner ever shows up and puts a claim on it. At some
No, well, I
point,
mean,
that money is
after auction, like when after all the fees are
right.
paid to whoever gets it, but
Right.
at auction, and
That's
then
right. That's right. So if the land sells for $10,000 and the taxes were only 1,000, the land commissioner will hold on to that 9,000 difference until somebody comes out and claims it. I think there is a time period where if nobody claims it, then eventually that's turned over to the county and the county holds on to it.
to the money.
Yeah.
So the person
Now, I'm not,
who, okay, so that's what I'm not clear on. So the person who has the property, if it's sold for more than what they owed, they get the money?
that's right. It's called excess
Oh, okay. So it
proceeds.
doesn't go
But
to
they,
the state or the county, the extra money.
right. And if it does, it's only after a considerable time period, a matter of years. But for the foreseeable future, it's held in case those folks come. In fact, when I worked in land commissioner's office, we dealt with that fairly often. A lot of this is why the property was tax delinquent in the first place. Now, a lot of the time it was because title was never transferred when somebody passed and the children just assumed it became theirs, which it probably did, but without probate, without a will and all that, the title never changed. And then that generation passed away. And the next generation says, well, I got it from my dad because it was my dad's, and he got it from his mom. But the title is still never changed. And so
Right.
when the county sends out tax bills, and then when the land commissioner sends out notification, a lot of the times, there's just no record of these people even existing. And they say, well, of course, this is my property. I got it from my family. A lot of the time, that's one of the reasons why it goes tax delinquent in the first place. And so eventually, when the property is sold and a neighbor is able to say, hey, your land was sold, and because they don't visit the property, they're out of state or what have you, that's when they come and claim the excess proceeds. Is when somebody does exist, but they don't live on the property. They don't have a close connection. They don't have it was easy to miss them. So that's one of the reasons why the property is held. The excess proceeds is held for their benefit. But that's also one of the reasons why it's important for the land commissioner to get top dollar for the property at auction, right? Because you want to make sure that that property owner is made good as possible. Because it's very painful if you have a quality property, a good property with no liens on it, and it's sold for a couple $1,000s. That's terrible. And so anything that could be done to make the property owner good is a good thing. And part of that is the going to public auction.
Okay, so Christian, when you're elected land commissioner of Arkansas, whose toes do you expect that you'll step on first? And what will you say to the voters who think we've heard these promises before? I want you to convince them why you're the man for this job.
So I don't know that I would necessarily step on anybody's toes just by being elected, right? Like you mentioned some endorsements earlier. I imagine some people that hoped the other guy would get elected might feel like their toes are stepped on a little bit. But a lot of politics is working together wherever you can. And I want to be the kind of person who always listens. I don't think we always have to agree, but there's so much value in hearing other people's perspectives and coming together for something that solves most of the problems, even if it doesn't solve all the problems.
So what you're saying is that you won't come to a meeting already prepared with your answer, like we saw in the was it Searcy County, where Cole sent in a proxy didn't even listen to the arguments. Already had the answer to give.
I'll tell you a story. So when I was at UCA, I was on the Housing Judicial Board. I was a rule-following homeschooler going to college, and a part of my job was making sure that the housing policies were followed. And I ended up being a little bit more of a problem for some of the staff than I think they expected, because I always want to make sure people get a fair shake. The Bible talks about having your answer before you hear the story and warning against that. And so I think having an open mind and listening, sometimes my sons will come to me and I already have an idea in my mind why they did something and I'm not happy about it. And then I hear their explanation and find out, mommy told them that it was okay to do. Like, oh, okay. Well, in that case, I don't have a problem, right? So it's so easy to have your mind made up beforehand. When you're the government, when you're representing the government, you're representing the taxpayer, you're representing the voters. You absolutely have to make sure that people are given a fair shake and that you hear their side before decisions are made.
But sometimes it's not a decision that you're making, it's an agenda that you have, which is what I was trying to point out. I'm sorry. I know you like to be a clean election and be nice and positive, but my job as a watchdog is to point out when people have an agenda. And when you bring your opinion already and your answer and your decision already before you even hear the arguments, that's an agenda.
Yeah, there are times where leadership does mean that you have to think things through, right, before you have to, face folks. But really, when that happens, I think you should also be prepared to articulate how you got there, right? I think holding like because I've been in politics for a long time, I always think it's a really interesting tension between doing what the person holding the office legitimately thinks is the right thing to do when there could be political pressure from the voters to do something different, right? Do you trust your own judgment? They elected you to use your judgment, but you're also responsible and accountable to the voters. And so I think in that case, being able to explain and being able to articulate why you think that a certain action is the best course is really how you keep the voters' trust. Your question was, everybody says these wonderful things while they're trying to get elected, and then once they take office, it becomes a whole lot harder. That's true. It is true. That's the function of the campaign. It forces elected officials to get out, or people who are hopefuls to get out and talk to people. And honestly, because the nature of the job where you're going out and working with counties and all 75 counties, I think there's a lot of accountability built into this already. But I enjoy the campaign trail. I enjoy talking to people. I enjoy hearing from people. But you're right. Ultimately, it can be very difficult for voters because it's so easy to say one thing while you're campaigning and then, simply stay home once you get elected. And that's not good. And that's one of the beauties of our system where you get to face the voters after a couple of years. In the land commissioner's case, 4 years.
So, what is your working relationship, or do you have a relationship with Sarah Huckabee Sanders? Like, do you know her, or did you have an opportunity to
Oh,
speak with her before she endorsed your opponent?
I had the opportunity to support her on her campaign.
Oh,
We
you
put out
did.
campaign signs. We actually participated in some fundraisers for her and that kind of thing. But I never really got a personal relationship with her. And that's okay. As governor, I'm sure she can't have a personal relationship with everybody, right? It's just a matter of numbers. But I do think that when it comes to my experience, my background, I can make the argument in the case that I've got the history in the Republican Party. I've got a past showing my conservative principles and credentials. And when it comes to work experience, I've got the skill set that I think will make the majority of people end up choosing me in the election.
So you're basically saying before she endorsed her appointee for the Secretary of State's office, who used to be her chief deputy counsel, I believe that's his title, a 28-year-old, she didn't even reach out to you, didn't contact you to see what you were about or any of that.
Unfortunately, I can't say that I was able to really make a case.
Considering, it just proves that people don't always support the person that's fit for the job. They support their cronies and people who will look up to them as mentors, um, and do their bidding.
I will say that the governor, of course, has the right to endorse whoever she thinks is best. And she does have that professional relationship with my opponent just from him working for her for a couple of years. And, that's her judgment. And I will go out looking for endorsements from voters. In fact, I'll try to get as many endorsements from as many voters as I possibly can.
Because those are the people that matter, honestly. They work. Everyone's talking about this is just everyone's talking about, well, she just got Trump's endorsement. Well, so didn't Cuomo, and look who lost in New York.
That's right. And my wife and I have had this conversation where, I am a hardworking candidate. We've gone between, I think in the next couple of weeks, so we'll hit the 15,000-mile mark on this campaign. And I know that if I don't do the work and if I'm not out there doing the job, then nobody's going to do it for me. I do have help in different parts of the state. I've built relationships, and I'm incredibly grateful and honored for the people who are helping me, who are trusting me. And that motivates me. And it sounds cliche, but it really does motivate me to not let them down and know that I'm going to do whatever I can to make my case to the voters and let them decide. But if I did have certain endorsements and certain support, it'd be a little bit easier to stay home with my family instead of being on the road night after night.
So
But
if
I owe it
people
to the
want,
voters to get out and talk to them.
I appreciate that myself as a voter. So if people wanted to reach out and have you, who do they need to reach out to?
Reaching out to me is a great way of getting to me. Christian at votechristian.com is my email address that will get to me. Votechristian.com is the website. There's a form on there that will also reach me.
Do you have a website where people can go to donate to your campaign?
Votechristian.com. I would love any donations I can get. I put some of my own money into this campaign. I've got some generous donations from people who've known me for decades. I've gotten some donations from people who've just heard me speak once. And I'm honored by every dollar that comes to the campaign. But yeah,
Who do you have
votechristian.com is the.
working with you on your campaign?
Alan Kerr is a former state representative. I actually worked on his campaign back in 2010,
I know Alan
and
very
he
well.
has been helping me quite a bit.
Alan's
And
a
then
good guy.
just Alan and his wife, Marlisa, have always treated me extremely well. And even when I was just a poor college kid that was trying to help organize his door to door for his state representative campaigns, they've always treated me very well. And one of the
And
things I've learned in politics is, you know, we're guided by our philosophy, we're guided by our principles, and policies matter. But how people treat the people around them as I've gotten older has just become a huge barometer for me about whether I can support somebody or not. If they treat the people that they pay well and just, are, if they just treat people, have a quality way of treating the people around them, they're probably pretty decent people. That's the kind of person that I'd like to put my trust in. So I'm really excited to have the Kerr support.
isn't uh, Ryan helping you out a little bit too?
Yep, yep. He's been helping. He's been providing some just support and how to think through messaging and
That's
some of
Ryan
those
Kemp
things.
James,
And
right?
that's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Yep.
Well, a lot of
I've
us
known
know who
him. In
he is.
fact, In fact, I go back with Ryan a long time. My wife and I actually got engaged to the Republican National Convention back in 2012, and Ryan and I and some other guys shared a room just to keep the costs down, and that was in Tampa, Florida, for the 2012 Republican National Convention.
That's awesome.
And yeah, he has a lot of know-how and a lot of great skills. I
Well,
appreciate him.
you
He's a
were
good
telling
friend.
me, I mean, I don't remember this, but of course, I didn't have anything to do with it. But you told me you used to be on the Dave Ellswick show as his young Republican panel.
That's right. Dave Ellswick, back in the early, 2010, 2011, right in there, had the youth panel. And Josh Mesker
Yep,
is a
love
friend of
Josh.
mine, and Whitney, it used to be Whitney Davis,
Yep,
before she
love
got
me
married.
some Whitney too.
Yeah, she tended to take a little bit more hard libertarian side, and
Hmm.
Josh took a pretty good social conservative side. And on some things, I'd be pretty libertarian. On other things, I'd be pretty conservative. I don't have a very good view of government because I don't have a very good view of human nature, right?
Right.
I am a Christian. I believe that a little bit of accountability for us goes a long ways. And so, like the Federalist Papers said, uh, if men were angels, we wouldn't need government. And then if men were angels, if government were angels, then we wouldn't need to hold them accountable too. But we all do better with a little bit of accountability.
Well, I mean, even our current government, which is red in the state, Republicans, which, those grassroots folks like Whitney, you, Josh, were the ones pounding the pavement to turn everything red. But now we can't, half the GOP is against, like, there's like a civil war. Like, I wrote an article a couple weeks ago about there's a civil war in Arkansas now. But, I like to hear the fact that you didn't just swoosh in with Sarah Huckabee Sanders when she came in after riding our coattails of doing all that work. I like the fact that you've been here on the ground doing the work. You've put in your time. You've hit the pavement. That is what I like about you, not to mention that you have the qualifications. So
Well, I
at this
appreciate you
point,
saying that.
Christian, you also have my endorsement.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. That means a lot to me. And you're right. When you work on campaigns and you lose, you become a little bit more sensitive to what works, right? You become a little bit more sensitive to how we need to be in order to win people to our side. And I feel like some of that might have been lost when we look at some of these elections nationwide that just happened. Republican, when you are in a competitive state, you have to be kept on your toes. And it's easy to criticize when your side doesn't hold power because you don't have to build anything, you don't have to hold anything together. But once your side does win, you're responsible for putting things together and communicating it to the voters in a way that they'll reward you by giving you a chance to continue to serve, right? And so holding power is absolutely much harder than trying to get it when it comes, you're just talking from a political party perspective, I think. And so you want to give grace wherever I can, but I do think that whenever there's disagreement or tension, that's where the responsibility of leadership to communicate really comes to the front. And I think some folks are just really, really good at communicating why they're doing what they're doing. And you don't have to like the decision, but you understand better how you got there. And because I've worked on campaigns and we've lost campaigns, I think that ability to communicate and just reach out to people who you don't necessarily agree with and who don't necessarily agree with you is a huge skill set. And I think that's really needed in our party right now.
I couldn't agree with you more. Well, I want to thank you, Christian, for coming on. Is there anything you'd like to leave voters with?
I just have really enjoyed the campaign trail, talking to voters. Like I said, we're closing in on 15,000 miles on this campaign. I am excited to offer my skill set and my experience to the voters. I've just been having a blast with the family, bringing them on the campaign trail. Yeah, we're actually going to Garland County tonight to talk to some Republicans down there. But really, uh, it's just been an honor. It's just been an honor to actually file and have my name on the ballot. It's been an honor to talk to voters all across the state, and I would appreciate your vote, appreciate your support, and votechristian.com is the best place to donate, to sign up. And Val, I appreciate you asking some of these questions. Some of the questions you asked are, very to the point. Some of them are a little bit difficult. Some of them I hadn't given a whole lot of thought to before. But I do think in any Republican primary, people get to choose, ideally, between this low tax person and that low tax person, this pro life person, that pro life person. The primary largely comes down to being able to look somebody in the eye and get a feel for who they are. And that's been my approach to the campaign. That's what I'm going to keep doing until March.
Well, thank you, Christian. And we'll be talking to you. And don't forget, you have my endorsement. So add that to your list.
Thank you so much. I
I don't know
appreciate
how
you
much
having me.
weight it'll carry or, something, but
I
you have my
appreciate it.
endorsement for sure. We will definitely have you back on. We've got a way to go for the election.
That's right. Sounds good. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, that's a wrap on today's conversation with candidate for Arkansas Land Commissioner Christian Olson. You just heard straight from the source why this office isn't just some dusty corner of state government. It affects your land, your taxes, your counties, and your future, whether you realize it or not. This race deserves sunlight, it deserves scrutiny, and if Arkansas is going to break the cycle of insider deals, political appointments, and real estate-driven policymaking, then voters need to start paying attention now and not after the election. If you found this conversation eye-opening, share it, talk about it, ask the hard questions of every candidate, because that's how we hold government accountable. I'm Val Emmons, and this is Full Val Mode. We don't soften, and we damn sure don't look away.